Today is the 16th of February 2021, and so we've come to sit in meditation, training our minds, and this training of the mind is very important. And you can ask ourselves, well, what is this mind? It's a knowing element, but it's something that we come to attach to, and all feelings that arise within it, and we take those as being me and mine. The Buddha taught, however, that this citta, this mind, is just this knowing element that receives the sense impressions. And the body is that which passes the sense impressions on to the mind. It takes in the forms, the sounds, etc., and brings them to the heart. And then these Dhamma aramanas, they arise within the mind. And so when the mind already cognizes these, when it already receives these, then if we have mindfulness and wisdom, we won't attach to any of it. Because we know that once we have attached, this becomes a cause for suffering to arise. This knowing element, however, has had avidya or ignorance in it for a very long time now. There's been this delusion present within it for very long. And within each life into which we get born, we take everything as being me and mine. And this view is very deeply embedded within our hearts. And so this avidya, not knowing, or another way we could put it is avidya is a habit. It's that habit that gives us the understanding that physicality and mentality is me and mine. And so there's this habit which gives rise to attachment, and then from that attachment we gain suffering. And so it's natural that when this attachment is there, when we've been born, then there's old age, sickness and death, there's sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair, all these different kinds of dukkha. And it arises because of this upadana, this attachment or clinging. And then this goes and becomes the cause for becoming, for birth. However, none of us wants to experience dukkha, the stress. There's not a single person in the world who wants to suffer. Even animals don't want to experience suffering. But this comes up due to causes and conditions. And when those causes and conditions cease, then that suffering ceases. But when they're there, then that suffering needs to be present. So this knowing element, it doesn't really have a clear understanding. And that's because we've accumulated attachments for a very, very long time now. Whenever we receive any sense impressions, then the knee-jerk reaction of the mind is to attach to them, to take it all as self. And we get the feeling that if we don't attach or identify with any of it, then we won't know where our hearts are going to stay. We won't know where the mind's going to reside. So we feel like we need to go and cling on to all of it. And that's how attachment works. But it gives rise to suffering. And when we see that this attachment does give rise to suffering, then we won't want to attach. And that's because we've seen the drawbacks in it. And so why are our minds deluded in this way? Even though we may see the nature of attachment, why do we still keep following on with it? And we need to give rise to knowledge. We need to gain knowledge for our minds. And we have this delusion that's been present since we were born. And it's something that we've even gained from our parents, from our mothers and fathers, that we depend upon them And they kind of have this delusion, and we receive their views as well. And we also depend upon the elements that we gain from our parents. And the earth, the water, the fire, and the air that we receive from them. And these start to develop, and they form into cells, and then these cells expand. Then they give rise to different organs in our bodies. And this is what we refer to as physical growth. So our mothers and fathers, they have this delusion. They think in terms of self, that they themselves exist, and this is my child. And then when we're born, we think that this is me, this body is me, and this is my mother, this is my father, this is my brother and sister, this is my friends. And that I am a person, or I am a human. And we gain this kind of understanding. But then perhaps a teacher or a monk tells us about not self, and it's really difficult for us to understand that, because right from the moment we were born, we've taken things in terms of self. It's been with us for a very long time. And then someone tells us that really these things are not self, and our hearts can't accept that. And Luang Por Chah gave a comparison, something that's easy to understand. He said it's like we build a house. We've got the land there already, and we build a home upon it. And perhaps it takes 6 months or 1 year for us to finish that house. And when it's been built, we decorate it, we furnish it, we make it a very nice place for us to stay in. And some the home that is strong and a comfortable place to live. But then one day someone comes along and they tell us, this house of yours, it's no good. You should pull it down, you should take it apart. But we've already built this house, and it's taken us a long time. And someone tells us that this is no good. So how are they going to convince us that really we should pull this house down? How are they going to tell us that so that we follow their instructions? Is that something that's easy for them to do, or is it going to be difficult? So this is a comparison to our bodies. These bodies are the homes of our hearts. And someone comes and says to us that this body, it's not really you or yours. Is it going to be easy for them to convince us of that? And just like someone trying to tell us to dismantle our house, we get the feeling, well, where are we going to live then? It's really not going to be easy for them to convince us to do that. And so this feeling that is really deeply embedded in us, that this collection of 4 elements is me, is something that's difficult for us to abandon. And even though we may know intellectually that it's just a collection of cells, it's tough to really understand that. We have the cells that make up the brain, the cells of the bones, the cells of the blood. And everything in this body is a collection of cells. So which type of cell is me? The cells in the brain, are they me? What about the blood cells? Are they me? But we get the feeling that all of this is me. It's all mine. And before I use my thoughts to contemplate in terms of wisdom, I thought, well, how about 300 cc of blood? If we take that out of the body, then it's quite easy to see that that blood is not me. But when it's inside my body, then it's very difficult. It's very difficult to tell myself that the blood within the body is not me or mine, so that the heart accepts that. Because this feeling of self is really deeply ingrained. So using our thoughts in this way can give us knowledge to 1 degree, and it's something that's still quite good to gain this degree of knowledge. But then there's still the mind comes and attaches to this body. It still takes it as a self. So we need to train our hearts to give rise to steady mindfulness so that our samadhi can become well established. We come to contemplate the breath as it comes and leaves and seeing it just as an element that's arising and ceasing. And then we can gain knowledge into the non-self of it. We can see that all things are not me, they're not mine. They just stay here temporarily. And we need to use them temporarily. We need to depend upon them. But we also need to gain an inner refuge as well, something that we can depend on in our own hearts. And so we take up this practice of abandoning evil, of giving rise to skillfulness. And we put our efforts in this way, just like how when we work, we need to use our mindfulness and wisdom. And we need to use this in our studies as well, so we can gain success in those activities. And it's the same with this path that leads out of suffering, that we're able to free ourselves from suffering due to our sincerity, due to our efforts. Because even in worldly ways, in order to gain success, we need effort to do that. So if we don't bring up effort, then there's no way that we can gain true knowledge, because the kilesas are engulfing our hearts in darkness. And there are these things which are present, which stop the mind from gaining peace, what we call the nivarnas, or the hindrances. And whenever we perceive a form, we hear a sound, then we don't understand that, or we don't know it in line with its truth, but rather we take it personally. We take it as a me or a mine. So there's this, the pleasure that we find in sensuality, the anger, the aversion that arises in our hearts, the scatteredness, the worry, the doubts that we have. And these are all Dhammas, these are all mental phenomena which arise, but they also cease. Even the unskillful phenomena arise and cease. So when there's contact, this gives rise to feeling, and then feeling goes on to craving. And no matter whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling, craving arises as a consequence of that. And this happens very, very quickly. And even though we may know this to one degree, still the kilesas are there within our hearts, and they've been there for a very long time. Or if we talk about it in another way, we could say that the kilesas arise in the present moment. So just like how if there's a lime that's there, and the substances within the lime that give the flavor of sourness are present, but if those chemicals don't come into contact with our tongue, then we don't taste any sour flavor. Or just like something with sugar in it, if that doesn't contact our tongue, we don't feel any sweetness. But rather these are things that we need to experience in the present moment. So if we have our mindfulness established in this present moment, then we see arising and ceasing happening in the present moment as well, and we understand the Dhamma right here and now. We see that all things are inconstant, they're stressful, they're not me. And we change our old views into new views. Our delusion turns into knowledge. But in the beginning, this knowledge arises little by little. It's not that we see everything clearly all at once. If we have sufficient barami, this is possible actually. Just like during the time of the Buddha, that people listen to his teachings and they can understand the Dhamma right there. I understand it to anatta right there, to see the Dhamma. Just like Lady Visakha, at the age of 7, she was able to see into the Dhamma. And there were some novices who, at 7 years old, attained to arahantship. What this shows is that their parami was already full. That in this life, as a young child, they could attain to the Dhamma, But in their previous lives, they had cultivated the barami for a very long time already, in order to be able to attain at a young age. And so what about us? We're not able to see the Dhamma like that all at once. It occurs slowly but surely, little by little. But as we carry on practicing, our sati gets stronger, our samadhi develops, and we will be able to know, we will be able to see, to understand with clarity. So there's no need to doubt about these things. So there is this Sakaya Ditti, this wrong view of self that is very deeply embedded. And when the mind comes into the body, it attaches to every single cell in this body as being mine. All these cells that we gain from our mother and father, we attach to them, but we also do need to depend upon them. Our minds depend upon them. However, it takes all of it as being me and mine, but really we just borrow this body from the world. Just like how we may be born in a house, and our mother and father, they rent that house. But we don't know that. No one's told us that. And we were born there and we stayed there for a very long time, for our whole lives. So we think that this is my home. And we take the home and everything within it as being me and mine, and no one tells us that really it's just a rented house. We've stayed there our entire lives. And so this is an external comparison, but we can draw links to this body that we've attached to, that we have this great attachment to. And even though sometimes it doesn't work so well, and perhaps maybe some nerves get pinched and one of our limbs goes numb. We don't have any feeling of our leg or our arm, for instance, but still we think that that's my leg, that's my arm. But if we understand in line with truth, in line with nature, we'll see that things are just this way. This is just a natural thing and that it's not me. So if the body's functioning well, then we experience different feelings, physical sensations. But if there are problems in the body, then we don't experience those sensations. We need to use our kammatthana, our meditation object, to bring our minds to peace. And this is a really high form of merit, because it's able to change our views from wrong views into right views. It becomes the means for us to see with clarity. And when we do this, then we won't be born into this world 8 more times. There'll be at most 7 times, but no 8th time. And within those 7 lives, we'll attain to the Dhamma. If we don't gain this clear understanding, however, then the lives that we're born into this world will be many. And within each life, we meet with difficulties in that life. And then we have to toss everything away. Everything that we gain in this life, we have to leave. If we have a lot, then we leave behind a lot. If we have a little, then we throw away a little. And for those with intelligence, however, they'll come to train. They'll understand that the external wealth that we gain, it doesn't stay with us for very long. So we need to come to find internal wealth. But it's not the case, however, that we don't bother at all with external wealth, because it is necessary for our lives, for us to maintain our lives. We do need to depend upon it. And the monks need to depend upon the wealth that the laity share. So it is something that's necessary. But what's of great importance is that we find this inner wealth, that we seek out our own hearts, that we gain knowledge. So the Buddha taught us to practice in this way. to see things as not self. But why is it that we take things as a self? In order to overcome this, we can use our thoughts to contemplate, use wisdom to give rise to samadhi, to see all things as being empty. And why is it that we can see things as being empty? Well, it's because everything is already empty. It's already that way. If physicality and mentality weren't empty, then we wouldn't be able to see it as being empty. But really, nature is this way. It's just that we need to bring up wisdom within ourselves in order to see that. And in order for wisdom to arise, it needs to depend upon mindfulness and samadhi. So we cultivate merit or kusala within our hearts and do this until it reaches a state of completion. Initially, we do this through generosity and morality. We build up parami in this way. And these qualities of generosity and morality are what bring the mind to peace, what take it to a divine state. And then we come to train in meditation in order to overcome the hindrances, in order to defeat the scattered nature of our mind. And these 5 hindrances, they're very old friends. And they're something that our minds don't want to be separated from. So what we need to do is get some new friends. The friends of samadhi. We can take the breath as our friend. We take up a meditation, take this as our new close friends, in order to abandon our other friends and to give up other things. So we bring our minds to be collected within the meditation object. And when we do this, then the friends of the 5 hindrances, they won't stay together with us. So we train ourselves like this, and in the process of this training, the heart gathers together, it reaches a state of rapture, of inner contentment. And there's this peace, this happiness there within the heart. And then we will gain an understanding of the benefits of meditation, and we'll want to train ourselves in it. We'll want to gain clear understanding. And then when we meet with this, we feel as though it's something that's really amazing. Even just perceiving external things as being anatta is an amazing experience. That the mind goes through rapture, it's very bright for many days and nights. And we'll get the feeling that all of the wealth in this world, it doesn't have any value for us. We won't really want to gain it for ourselves. But what we'll be after is attaining to the Dhamma. That this has far more value. We realize that it's better for us to seek out the Dhamma, for us to make our minds pure. And so if we see with clarity one time, then the mind reaches the level of a sotapanna. And if we see it 2 times, then it reaches sakadagami, and 3 times anagami. And then when this mind experiences full purity, it reaches the state of an arahant. And then the pure knowing element arises. However, in the beginning, we take all things as being mine. But the self is something we need to abandon in stages. So I ask for all of you to really be sincere in this training, to give it your best shot in this life, because the time we have left is not long. The past 30 years or 40 years, they've gone by very, very quickly. So may all of you really bring up your efforts, really try to give rise to wisdom, so you can gain an understanding of the elements that have collected together all these cells, that really these aren't me. Their nature is for them to be that way. It's just that we need to understand their true nature and let go of these things. Let them follow their own nature. So may all of you set your hearts in this way.